Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I'm here with Rachel Johnson, who is the CEO of PiXL. How are you doing, Rachel?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Enjoying being here with you today.
Excellent. So if you could start us off and give us, a little bit more background as to who you are, what it is you do exactly, how long you've been doing it for, please, Rachel.
So I'm the CEO of PiXL. We're an educational organisation, a leadership organisation that works with over 2,000 schools in the UK. I became CEO in January 2020. Quite a dramatic story, maybe for another time. But I've actually been in the organisation since 2013. And before that, I was in a senior leader in two schools. So education background, still in education now, but leading PiXL to equip school leaders to be agents of change and to help young people improve their outcomes and their life chances. So a varied role and a really
Yeah,
exciting one.
brilliant. I mean, you mentioned there about it was a bit of a dramatic story, but the next question really is sort of how did you get into that role? Kind of, I suppose, where did you come from to go into it? And if you're okay with it, to expand a little bit more about how you sort of came to be sat here today, really.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So it's a bit of a dramatic story in that my father founded PiXL and came
Right.
out of the London Challenge years and years ago. And so I was one of the directors in kind of 2017, 18, 19. But in the summer of 2019, he got diagnosed with terminal cancer and was given a year left to live. So he didn't want people to know. We have different names, my married name and his surname. So people didn't necessarily know we were related. So
Yeah.
we started the change thinking about succession. And so the plan was that in January in 2020, he was going to meet with the fellow directors to look at what we do about appointing a CEO. I said, I'll be interested in this role. So I stepped out of the conversation. But unfortunately, he collapsed and then died on the 17th of January,
Mm.
2020. And I was asked to step into the role on the Monday, 3 days after he died. So, 2020, my dad's just died. I'm not sure if people will stay working with our business because they've been following him, and I'm a bit of an unknown. I was still quite well known in PiXL,
Yeah.
but had never intended to run a business, had never intended to really to be the CEO. And so
Yeah.
we started leading the company in January, was made permanent, but then went into a global pandemic. And when you run a business which is all face-to-face contact, that was a pretty dramatic few months. So we started dramatically reinventing the business to meet the needs of schools who, were in really difficult circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, that's how I started. So I think the answer to the original question is that I'd never intended to be here, never intended to be doing
Yeah.
this, and hadn't planned for it. I found myself picking up something and
Sure.
running with it, and I love it. And I'm so pleased it happened that way. But yeah, a dramatic beginning to my leadership journey.
Bet you've learned a few lessons, but before we
Oh,
go in, before we go into those, just a couple of more bits for kind of context, really. I think uh, is it a private company? So it's just in terms of the formation of the company, is it a limited company? And you
limited
don't,
by guarantee.
yeah,
But we're very unusual. So there are no shareholders who make any money. So if Pixel ceased to trade, then any monies left over would go to seven children's charities. Nobody makes any money. We're all paid a wage, but we don't. No one's going to make money from it. No one's going to sell it. No one's going to kind of make their pockets, bulge with cash. That's not
yeah,
the intention. So we are for profit, but we aim to put any profit we make into schools because schools don't have money. And schools are
yeah,
just full of opportunity, but not always the resource. And so
sure,
for us, we exist to serve them. And so we don't
yeah,
want to make loads and loads and loads of profit. I think if we had a different business model, we could, but that's not
yeah.
the aim. We aim to serve school leaders and be responsive to their need. So yeah, so that is the basic answer to that question. But it means that we are all very invested, we're all very equal. The
Yeah.
whole thing is based on doing the right thing for young people and for leaders.
Brilliant. And how big is your team there? What sort of team did you have to go in and start leading a few days later after obviously your father's death?
Yes, there's about 30 of us, I'd say, at the beginning. It's now up to 48. We've
Wow.
expanded.
Okay.
People have come and gone, but actually not many people have come and gone. We have a pretty core, stable team. But I think one of the challenges of taking over from a strong personality, from someone who's had a life in leadership, who's got a knighthood because of it, has run
Mhm.
schools, has written books, when you inherit that, especially after someone has died and there's all that
Yeah.
emotion around it, it is really quite difficult to work out, okay, how do I sound as a leader? How am I going to move this forward? How am I going to make this organization something that I'm leading? and not fall into the temptation of keeping his seat warm, which I never wanted to do. I always
Yeah.
wanted to lead it in the way that I was convicted to lead it. But that's a challenge when you weren't expecting it, when it's come, a real rush in those
Yeah.
circumstances. You have to learn rapidly, that and get comfortable with yourself and your leadership,
Yeah.
and understand how to bring a team with you when they're also in shock. It was a bigger shock to them
Yeah. Yeah.
actually than me because I knew that he was terminally ill. They didn't. So
Yeah.
he was here 1 minute, gone the next. So just helping people come through their own processing is something that took a little while, but people have been absolutely brilliant and have been for the last 5 years. So yeah, they are thriving, thankfully. And as a result, I'm thriving, which is an amazing thing to be able to say, really.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're here, t being able to tell the story and inspire others. I'm sure by doing that. So, thank you for, as I say, coming on and yeah, being open to doing this. So, in terms of you guys and the organization, the business, is there anybody else that kind of does this? Are you quite unique? Is that what you do makes you stand out in the
Yeah, I
marketplace
think
and
we're
schools
pretty unique.
division?
Yeah,
Yeah,
when we started, we were totally unique. People didn't have this kind of system. There wasn't this kind of school to school support. There wasn't this kind of network. And so in the beginning days, it grew entirely through word of mouth and largely still does actually. So that's been a real privilege that we've grown through people's recommendations. But I think what we do that's different to other organizations, of which there are many out there working with schools, is we try and take it all together. So we listen to school leaders. That's the most important thing. Like, what are the real issues that are going on? Not the sound bites you hear on the news, but what's
yeah,
really going on. And then we do the research around what that issue might be. Then I think crucially, we take research from outside of education, psychology, business, lots of different areas, and then we bring that learning and translate it into education. And that is pretty unique. It's becoming more popular now because people see the impact of that. But once we do that, we then say, here's an approach or approaches, here's some solutions. And then here we're going to now help you work out what you want to do with that. So we don't tell people what to do. We give them options, we help them think. Massively important to our organization to think for themselves, but we give them the material and then we produce resource, we have conferences, and then school leaders who've tried some of this stuff and have massive impact then come back and talk to others about what they're doing. So it's a real network, but it's all those elements are together in one place with a membership fee, and they get all of that. And that is very unusual, I would say, even now.
fantastic. My dad, he's retired now, but yeah, was a head teacher. And
Lovely.
yeah, some of the things that he talks about in terms of leadership and management, and I'm not 100% sure exactly where he got his support. I know was quite well studied in it, but there's also a natural ability to kind of lead and inspire his teachers and the staff and the pupils there. But yeah, something like this sounds amazing. And how long have you been around in terms of doing what you do? Is it the last sort of 10, 20 years? Is this kind of a new sector,
Yeah.
is really?
So it came from the London Challenge. So it was a government initiative where my father, who was a head teacher, retired, got a knighthood for services to education. And then the government approached him to ask, would he be involved in London Challenge? So he was involved in that with all the big names in education at the time and had huge success. So he started with 50 schools, all of whom found the leadership, essentially the training element really helpful. Their
Yeah,
outcomes went up. They found a real sense of belonging and connection and community. And when the government pulled the funding, all 50 said, we want to continue. And
yeah,
so PiXL was born from that. So that was around 2006, 7, 8 kind of time,
yeah,
really between 2002 and 2006, 7. Then it became PiXL officially. And then it's grown since then. So, yeah, we've been around a while now, but constantly evolving because schools are constantly evolving. And I
yeah,
think one of the things that we're really mindful of is the building looks the same, the things we do are the same. We teach young people, we do exams, but how that works now is entirely different to how it
yeah,
worked 15 years ago. So we are always trying to be responsive to need, the latest challenges, the latest obstacles, and the opportunities. It's all of those things. but trying to give leaders time to think. When you're in the middle of it, it's really hard to
Yeah.
step above it and think and look down on it and work out your next move. So we try and help leaders do that.
There's a lot of similarities in terms of what we do in a business environment for business leaders, business owners, directors, managers, to obviously what you're helping school leaders with as well. When you
Yeah.
see looking down, it's like a thing that springs to mind was working on the business versus working in the business. So
Yeah.
helping
Yeah.
take a step out while it doesn't feel like they've got time or the right thing to do. It's the most important thing to do is to be able
Oh,
to
yeah. I
look at
totally
what's
agree, but
going
it's
on.
also hard because I'm not sure what it's like in other businesses, but certainly in education, there is a real desire to be downstream or to be kind of on the dance floor, making the change and getting
Yeah.
to the balcony view or getting upstream, as Dan Heath would say, and looking back down. People don't often prioritize that because the urgent is more important. And so one of the things we really try and do is to say, come out of the whirlwind, come out of the dance floor, come out of downstream and just sit with us and think because you'll get clarity and you'll be better for it. And everybody says that is one of the biggest things they appreciate about what we do is we give them time to think. And
Yeah.
in our industry, people still, sadly, feel they need permission to do that because it's all encompassing and there's always something kicking off in a school. So giving yourself time to step away
Yeah.
is hard, but so
Yeah.
important because we get clarity that way, don't we? So
Definitely, yes, giving you kind of space to have that opportunity to, make a decision with clarity of thought rather than trying to make it with 100 things going around your head at the
yeah.
same time. Lots of things kicking off, as I'm sure they do at schools, but it's same with businesses as well. When
Yeah.
there's customers demanding things, there's
Yeah.
team member issues that need to be dealt with. There's this product issue, all those things. So there's a lot of similarities there. So what are the biggest challenges and opportunities for you looking ahead? Pandemic gone, hopefully, for
Yeah.
the time being. But things you can kind of predict or the future for you guys. What's the strategy going ahead?
Yeah, so it's interesting really because our future is almost linked to school's future. And although the pandemic is over, its effects really are not.
Mhm.
So what we're seeing in schools now is a broken home and school relationship. So parents are responding in entirely different ways now to how they used to. Motivation is different with young people. We've got all of these things like, SEND rise happening with more special educational needs, which is brilliant that they're being diagnosed. It's brilliant. But we in the education sector struggle to know quite how to manage that with class sizes of 30, feel like there's not enough support. We've got this whole thing about toxic masculinity, awful phrase. But looking at boys and the issue of boys, and I think what our schools find is that they're at the end of every government initiative and they've got to do something about it. And it can feel sometimes like all the ills of society have to be solved in the doors of in the classrooms of a school. And
Yeah.
that's hard. So as a business, what we're trying to do is not get reactive, not start showing adolescence to everybody, because that doesn't fix the problem, but to
Mhm.
step back and to say, look, here's what we think is coming. If we know that parent-school relationships are broken from before the pandemic, it happened during the pandemic, then what does the research say in leadership around how we get that back, how we build bridges? Let's think about it. Because we know school leaders can do anything once they put their minds to it, but they can't do everything. And so
Yeah.
that our business needs to shape around their needs, which is what we do. We listen to them. We are highly responsive to them. If an issue comes up, like the issue with boys, we do that piece of work in the moment and it'll be out 5 weeks later. So we're very quick, very responsive, and our business shifts and shapes itself around the needs of school leaders. And I'm really proud to say that because a lot of businesses have their 5-year plan and it's going to happen like we planned. We do
Yeah.
have a plan, big plan, a press release that we wrote for 2027, which we wrote 2 years ago and said we're going to release this in 2027. Let's make it true. So we have got a plan, but part of the plan is being responsive. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's where we need to be, I think.
Brilliant. Again, yeah, it's I suppose it's principles of leadership and planning really that the having your plan and writing it for the future to then work towards and bringing that future into reality. Again, something that we advocate here very much at Action Coach, and coaching models across the world will advocate for that as
Yeah,
well.
so important.
It's brilliant, kind of crossing those sectors with what you do, from business right through to, same with sports, anything like that, isn't
Yeah,
it? Why should education leaders be any different, or not have the support and resources to do the same thing, really? So it's
agree.
fantastic. So moving on to yourself then, Rachel, and getting a little bit more background as to uh, your biggest lesson as CEO, if you can reflect on
Oh,
the time that you've
so
had.
many, so
Is there
many.
one that stands out, or even if it's maybe a one and then two or three kind of come off the back of it? Feel free to.
Yeah, it's difficult to give one, but I will package it up so it sounds like
Yeah.
one. But for me, it was unlocking kind of the holy trinity of things that I'd never really explored before. So the holy trinity that I had to crack was people pleasing, not having boundaries, and being able to say no, all of which are
Yeah.
completely linked. And I think one of the biggest things that I did initially when I first came into my leadership was have a leadership coach. For 3 years, I did that, but I understood actually that you can have plans, you can go on courses, you can learn about business and the technical aspects of running business. But unless I have complete control over myself, I notice what's going on inside of me. I see how I'm reacting. I can pivot and change. I cannot people please anymore. I unpack all of that. Unless I do all of that, I'm not going to be fulfilled. I'm not going to be the best version of me. And people deserve to be led well. And if we've got people who are following, they deserve to be led well. And so, actually, the biggest lesson I would say is I spent and still do spend hours working on myself, examining myself, thinking about different models that might work, trying to work out where I am, why I've reacted like that, so that I have boundaries. I'm not responding out of people pleasing. I'm courageous. I can take risks. I know how to have crucial conversations without feeling embarrassed or awkward, that I can say no to the right things and yes to the right things. I can balance my life in a way that means I'm not living frantically at 100 miles an hour, always feeling like I'm never enough or not doing enough. And I don't
Yeah.
think that is talked about enough openly. I know it happens in coaching conversations all the time, but what we try to do at PiXL and what I particularly have tried to do is to out these conversations and to have them openly with hundreds of people, thousands of people, and to say, actually, you can learn how to be a great leader and you should. You should do the work. You should learn how to run schools. You should be brilliant at all of that. But actually, let's look at what's going on in you and work out where you're tripping yourself up and let's deal with that. Because ultimately, that's what makes people great leaders, isn't it? People who can be authentic, show up, understand what's going on, empathize, listen. But all that can't happen if you're in your own head, getting yourself, stuck. So,
That is a brilliant share, because I couldn't agree more with it. Recently, I mean, you can go quite deep with it, but to kind of keep it on a on a level with it. But I read, the only true security is being secure within yourself. Everything else is obviously changeable, and it comes and it goes. But yeah,
does.
that kind of inner security is what the goal is, really. And then
Yeah,
once
and
you
I
get
think
control of that,
that
you
is
can lead.
true.
Yeah,
When we were kids, I'd imagine we're kind of similar ages. Self-esteem was the thing that was talked about. And I know now that word has morphed into something I think a bit more healthy, which is self-acceptance. And I think
yeah,
that's really interesting because self-esteem implies, by the very word esteem, that you're meant to think quite well of yourself. Self-acceptance, I think, is different. It implies like I've got flaws, but I have accepted that I am a work in progress, that I'm not perfect, that I'm flawed, that I'm vulnerable. I can admit all of those things without losing face. And I
yeah,
think everybody feels they can admit that. And I think we are poorer in the world because people can't say it. And what we see in
yeah,
leadership globally is people going quite the opposite direction. Strong man, can't get me, I don't care, all of
yeah.
that. And yeah, that's not the kind of model of leadership I like at all. So
Well, I have faith that that it'll be a development that will come to fruition as we see what not to do versus what to do, and the results, So, but that's a great share, and thank you very much for that. I say one that's resonating really, really well on this side of the camera. So, if we were to go back in time and then ask Rachel at the age of 18, what advice would you give yourself kind of before stepping into all the roles that you've done, and heading an organization such as PiXL, what piece of advice would that
Mm.
be in hindsight?
Good one, isn't it? I've done an exercise like this recently, actually, where you kind
Yeah.
of write a letter to your younger self, and I found it so
Yes.
illuminating. Just let the pen go. And I
Yeah.
think from that exercise, and that's only been the last 6 months, really, I think the lesson I would tell my littler self is don't minimize yourself. You don't need to do that. So I think when you grow up, as I did, with a very charismatic father who was amazing, we got on so well, just so united in so many ways, and literally I'm running the company he started. But you can sometimes think, oh, I could never be, I can't. You kind of step into the shadow a little bit where people pleasing
Yeah.
comes from. And I think I got mixed up in my understanding of what humility looked like. In my head, as a young person, humility meant make yourself smaller, don't make a fuss, look
Mhm.
after other people more than yourself. It's not about you, it's about them. And so I had a very wonky view of humility. And so as I grew up, I took that wonky view. And when people said, do you want to speak at this? Do you want to write a book? I'd go, oh no, oh no, 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 that would no be causing a fuss. And so I just said no to loads of things. And it's been in the past 4 years when I have written books, I said yes. My third one's coming out at the end of May. I've done podcasts that I love doing. But for me to do that, it took me to say to myself, hang on a second, like, you've got humility mixed up here. What is humility? And actually, when you look at the origin of the word, when you look into what humility is, it's just not thinking of yourself all the time. It's not saying not me, it's just saying not me all the time. Other people are important. I can get it wrong. But also, it means I believe I can do it. It just means that I can't do it on my own. I need help. I'm flawed. And so that's actually very liberating when you get to the point of saying, I can do these things. It's not me showing off. It's not me being big-headed. It's not me being arrogant. I don't like any of those things and still don't want to ever be that.
Yeah.
But I went the opposite direction to the extreme and just kind of made myself a bit small.
Yeah.
Um, it's linked with people pleasing, linked with boundaries, linked with not being able to say no without fear of causing offense. But ultimately, that gets you stuck. And
Yeah.
since I've not had that view of humility, now I've re-narrated what I mean by that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've said yes to more things, including things like this.
Brilliant. And I'm glad you have, and I'm glad you've done it. But yeah, it's doing the right things that come from the right place. Sometimes there's no kind of specific words. You just get the feeling that yes, this is not an ego-driven acceptance. This is the right thing to do.
Yeah,
You just
it
let it
is the right thing
happen.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd say, as well as like don't minimize yourself, don't discount yourself. The other piece of advice I'd have given myself is don't feel the need to outsource your self-esteem to anybody or anything else. And I'm glad that I've learned that lesson over the past 10 years, I would say, because when you start writing books and the Amazon review comes into play, like I
Yeah.
like checking Amazon reviews every day to work out if I'm good or not. Just
Yeah.
because someone's given me a 5 star or a 1 star. For me, that's outsourcing my self-esteem. So I now have the absolute privilege and liberation, really, of writing the best thing I can possibly manage with
Yeah.
what I've got and who I am, and
Yeah.
release it into the world and say it's okay if people don't like it. It's okay if people don't agree with me. It's not a reflection on my worth. It's just
Yeah.
different people having different opinions, and that's great, isn't it? Let's talk about the different opinions. How brilliant.
It
So
comes
that's been liberating.
comes back to your lesson, I think, about that kind of self being all right with yourself and not letting that outer noise impact you, and that yeah, makes you a better leader and clarity of thought and all of those things we've kind of
Yeah.
covered. So that's a nice kind of full circle way to come. So in terms of inspiration for what you do, before we kind of wrap up, what is that? I mean, I can imagine there's a lot of things going on, but again, if there's something you can summarize the inspiration with, what would it be?
Yeah, so I treat reading like a prescription, and this is where I get most of my inspiration. So I will think to myself, oh, I'm feeling this, or I can see this is a problem. And I think which book would help me work that out? And then I pick up the book. And for me, it's like sitting with a real person, having a real conversation, which I love, and being
Yeah.
guided and made to think. And so as a result of that, that's where I find inspiration when I'm interacting with something. And I kind of
Mhm.
think, oh, that's a really good idea. Oh, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And then I kind of ignite my own thoughts. So that's been really helpful. There are some great leadership thinkers out there. You know
Yeah.
all the usual suspects. But just listening to them, hearing them, disagreeing with them or thinking,
Yeah.
how does that work? Actually, it's the translation where I find inspiration, not just
Mm.
the reading of the thing, but the doing something with it.
Yeah.
And I think what inspires me on a day-to-day basis is I think when I was younger, people said, "Oh, Rachel, I bet you're going to change the world." And what a burden, actually. I mean, I know why they said it, but I'm like, change the world?
Yeah.
Like, I can't change the world.
Yeah.
But what I've learned as I've grown up and as I've matured and as I've got this job is that you can change one person's world. First of all, you change your own. That's the most important world to change, isn't it? Mine, so that I'm
Yeah.
more effective. But every time I have a one-to-one interaction, something shifts in me and in them. And actually, if you have one-to-one interactions times 3,000, and then those people go on to have one-to-one interactions and it changes again, then you can actually quite quickly change whole communities, whole sectors in my case. And maybe then you can change the world. But aiming to try and change the world is a bit too big. So I aim to help individual people who come
Yeah.
together, and as a result of that change, organizational and system change happens. So
Fantastic.
yeah, I'm inspired by the people I work with every day, teachers in schools, leaders in schools, doing the job, doing the
Yeah.
hard stuff, who
Yeah.
are hungry to learn.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, a lot of respect to them. As you say, there's a lot of responsibility that gets pointed at schools these days, and
Yeah.
it's a collective responsibility, one would suggest, in terms of how we can all help each other. So that's a great share on your inspiration. Thank you. So then, lastly, in terms of latest news before we wrap it up, or even it's a case of sharing your website so people can go and understand more about what you guys do, feel free to share that now.
Great. So the website is www.pixel, that's pixl.org.uk. So there's much more information on there. We have two podcasts, Pixel Pearls, which I do, 10 minutes of leadership reflection, a story, an application, and some questions. And then the Pixel Leadership Book Club, which is my favorite, where we take non-educational leadership books, which lots of people who watch this know, and two school leaders discuss how they've taken the lessons and adapted them into education, but it's appropriate for anybody. So there's little things there. The three books that I've written, Time to Think 1, Time to Think 2, and then Box Clever, which is on quadrants to change the way we live and lead, coming out at the end of May. But if there are any business leaders who are listening who want to work with schools, who've got products that schools might buy, and you want to offer discounts so that schools can engage with you better, then we have a website called Pixel Save where we give our members discounts. So whether you're in electricity or you're in
Yeah,
anything really, uh,
brilliant.
that if schools have it and need discount on it, then do get in touch at admin@pixel.org.uk.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rachel. We'll make sure to mention that in the description at the bottom of anything that we share for you. Been a real pleasure talking with you. Thank you for being so open and sharing all that you have, and I wish you all the best for the future success of the organization.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you.